Hello, everybody. I'm Rachael Johns, and I'm here as a guest host on Rights for Women podcast. And today I am delighted to be interviewing Dr. Amy T. Matthews. I'm going to ask you what the T is. I don't know if you're going to give it away, but I've wanted to know for years. What is the T?
It's Therese. It's Therese.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know I had a pen name that was Tess for a while.
Of course.
So I could answer to
Today
it.
I'm interviewing Dr. Amy Therese Matthews. See, that sounds really even more important. We'll talk about why she is the doctor. But her latest novel is Someone Else's Bucket List, which I think Amy, for those who are watching, has a cover there. That's the Australian cover.
Yeah, I love the Australian cover. I think they did such a good job.
So if you're listening to this in the US, you may have already read Someone Else's Bucket List or listened to it, and you'll have a different cover. But it is out January the 31st in Australia. So we're going to be shelf buddies with
Yeah, because you're January 30, right?
So when we're both out and about stalking,
I've got your book here too. I'm going to hold yours up.
Oh, lovely! Thank you.
I've got the advanced copy.
Thank you. We've got each other's arcs. This is the arc of Amy's. So yeah, her cover is much prettier than the arc. So
yeah. So I'll hold the pretty one up.
Anyway, so we can stalk each other as well when we're taking.
Yeah. We talk writing. It's hard to shut us up once we start talking writing.
Exactly. So I have read it, and it's described as a tear-jerking, heartwarming story of sisterly love. But we'll just go a little bit of a spiel for those of you who don't know who Amy is, but I'm sure you will know very soon if you don't already. Amy's first novel is End of the Night Girl, which won the Adelaide Festival Unpublished Manuscript Award and was longlisted for the Australian Vogel Literary Award. That's amazing. I don't think I knew about that.
Yeah. That was exciting when that happened. I was quite young, so that was before I cleaned it up and it got published. It got longlisted.
Because you have to be under 35 to that one, don't you?
I probably just scraped in, to be honest.
That novel was also shortlisted for the Nita B. Kibble Dobby Award. That's a bit of a mouthful. And the Colin Roderick Award. Wow. Amy currently is an associate professor at the Flinders University and a former chair and long-serving board member of Writers SA, which is a fabulous organisation if you're in South Australia and a writer or want to become a writer. And you're also the associate member of the J.M. Coetzee Centre for Creative Practice.
Yeah, and a member of Romance Writers of Australia, as you are. I should put that on the website.
You should.
I haven't updated my website. I usually do it every February, but the website I sit and do it every 6 months or so.
Yeah, and you've got 3, which we'll also talk.
I know that was a choice.
No, the reason Amy has 3 websites.
I've actually got 4 if you count my work one. If you count my work.
Overachiever here. I've only got 1. I've
overcommitted.
I don't know. But anyway, the reason Amy has 4 websites is because, as well as being published as Amy T. Matthews, she's also, as we've said, a professor, and you've got your academic publications, and so a website for them.
Yep.
And if that's not enough, she also writes under the names Amy Barry and Tess LeSue.
Yeah, I've got the advanced reader copy coming out in Australia in, I think this one's April.
So Amy Barry, the first book is Kit McBride Takes a Wife.
Yeah,
so funny.
There we go, people.
The cover, it's awesome. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. There's so much to talk about with Amy. I don't know. This is probably going to be a very long podcast. So,
yeah.
I hope you've got a long cup of tea, or you're going for a long walk or a long drive and you're ready to listen to us yak on about writing. So welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm really keen to talk.
I'm excited to talk to you because you are a wealth of knowledge about writing, publishing, the romance as a genre. There's so many things. So we could probably have done 3 or 4 podcasts about different things. Yeah. But anyway, I will mention later on, and we'll talk about that. Amy also runs a podcast. First season was out this year. Is that right?
Yeah, so we'll have another season starting off around May. And we're doing little footnotes here and there as well. So we've got some interviews coming out soon. It's called Love on Campus, and it's about romance and romance books. I have done
so much. I love the 3 of you talk about.
Yeah, it's so much fun to talk romance. It's the best. I could talk romance as you could, like, forever. Yeah,
so we'll definitely maybe talk a little bit of that if we have time. But I strongly recommend, if we don't have time, that you also, as well as listening to women, you do check out Romance on Campus. Sorry. But anyway, first, let's get stuck in. Even though I've known you for quite a while, I don't think I actually know, how you got into writing, why you started. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey? Did you always want to be an author?
Yeah. I don't think I ever thought it was possible, actually. When I was young, I've always written and I've always loved reading. And I'm part of the reason I have so many names in so many genres is I do it all at once. And probably a friend of mine says your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. And I think part,
yes, isn't it?
yeah,
It really is. Yeah.
yeah. And it's good for character too to think greatest strength, greatest weakness. But probably I am interested in too many things at once and find it hard to just stay in one lane. So I always read everything and I think I always wrote everything and wanted to give everything a go. So I've always written, but I don't think it ever crossed my mind I could ever legitimately be an author.
Yeah. Some say that, don't they?
Yeah. So then, and I didn't know any. It didn't seem, and I wasn't like tapped into any writers' communities or anything. So it was around my mid-20s. I just had this feeling like I'd done a couple of degrees. I used to be a wedding planner. Like,
wow.
Yeah. No, so I spent weekends running all these weddings and events.
Ties into the romance.
Yeah. And I was just feeling really unfulfilled. And I just remember my dad saying to me, you only get to do it once. Really think about what you want to do and go for it. And I remember thinking, I love writing. So I went back to uni. I went to the University of Adelaide and did honours in creative writing. And it was funny because I turned up just to talk to them about doing English because I was like, I really liked English. Maybe I could go back and do honours. And they said to me, oh, we've just started a postgraduate program in creative writing.
Oh, wow.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know you could do that. I was like, that seems crazy that you could just go and study writing because that would be all I want to do.
Too much fun.
Yeah. So I did. I went and did that for a year and really loved it and then went into the PhD. And we can talk about this because I know you have experiences too. The institution I was in, and I'm still part of my fun is I do like doing literary writing as well, but it was very literary focused.
What year were you doing yours?
Honours was 2002.
Okay, so I was 99, so around.
Yeah, so same era.
After uni, and so it's about then, it was 99 to about 2002, yeah. So I think it in 2023, so it would have been definitely.
And so I think I worked out the only way to get the grades was to write in this way, right?
Well, I'm glad that you managed to work out how to do that.
But it did curate my writing. Meanwhile, on the side, I've always loved romance, always. Like I was such a binger of historical romance all through my youth. So like I've got every Joanna Lindsay book when it came out every 6 months, and I loved like all the historical romance. But also read
anywhere. Like, how did you get into that?
It was actually my friend Kate, which leads us into this because this book was inspired by my friend who passed away. But when we were in year, I think it was like I always read Sweet Valley High and all that stuff. But in year 9, she brought her mum's old bodice rippers, like they were really old 70s ones, like Kathleen Woodworth and all those. And she'd bring them and sneak them in, and we'd all swap them around and just loved them. And so my whole friendship group, we just devoured these romances on the side. And I just remember when I went to Target, my mum would never, she just loved that we read. So I could buy anything as long as I was reading. So if I went to Target with her, I'd come home with all these Joanna Lindsay books.
That was me with my kids. I think when they were littler, and one of them's a reader. And one of them works in a bookshop, the oldest, but the younger one still a reader. The middle one never really was. But I'm always like, I'll buy any books because I think we just books. So
same. And I don't care what you read, just read. So I feel like the early part of my career, I think it took me a long time to come out of the closet with what I really loved writing, because there was, even if it's not explicit, there's a kind of embedded snobbery in universities for poetry and literary fiction. And
let's face it, though, it's not even just universities,
No, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Even I have people, I'm not going to name them publicly, but people in my life who they'll read a book and they'll say, oh, but it's still just a romance, isn't it? You try and write one.
Exactly. That's a whole other conversation.
But they're the same people often who will be reading Jane Austen every year. Like they'll go back and read their whole collection of Jane Austen. It's like, that's just a romance too. Yeah. So anyway, I
get summon Jane Austen from the dead.
That's right. If she was writing now, she'd be writing rom-coms like the other Bridget Jones. She would. That's exactly what she'd be writing. Yeah, so I think what happened was I did my PhD, and that was End of the Night Girl, and there was a monograph called Navigating the Kingdom of Night. I loved writing that, and I enjoyed it. It was very dark, really heavy, really literary, very clever, and I finished it up and I'd had a child by then. I think I was pregnant with my next. And I just didn't want to sit in a really serious, dark place all the time. So I was like, you know what? I always loved romance. I'm going to write a romance. And that's when the name Tess LeSue happened. LeSue, because they were fun. So I wrote this series that was published by Berkeley in the US called the Frontiers of the Heart series. That did really well. It was in like Walmart and all those places back when mass market paperbacks were still really selling.
Oh, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So they were just great fun. They were like a romp. I always say it's like Romancing the Stone kind of style, like farcical, funny romances. And I just loved it. But then I found when you're at a university, there's still a lot of snobbery about it. So when you want to advance your career, there's a lot of, oh, they're just romances. But I was lucky in that the publishers were quite prestigious.
Yeah.
So although they could go, oh, they were just romance, they'd then see Penguin Random House and be like, oh, I know that's like the top literary publisher in the world. Must be okay. So I think that was lucky. And then, I, with Bucket List, wanted to get back to what would I write under my name. It's not as dark as End of the Night Girl, and it's not as serious, but it's getting back more towards, I don't know, book club fiction, they call it. So it's like women's fiction, not pure romance, but it's got heavy romantic elements.
It does have strong romantic elements. It's hard to, I feel like it's very similar to, I think, a few of the things that I wrote like some of my women's fiction are more romantic than others. Yeah. And it's hard sometimes to put that in a hole because but I think that book club fiction, you've got issues, and it could almost feel, although it is a heart-wrenching book and it's a sad story in many ways, there's a lot of kind of humorous moments.
And my editor was like, so my agent called it rom sad. So it's like a rom-com where you're also going to have a couple of big ugly cries at some point.
Yeah, because I was thinking there are definitely rom-coms. So it's really, that's that whole, how to putting something in a box sometimes is not necessarily easy, is it? You don't
I understand on a marketing point of view, but when you're coming at it as a writer, that's hard. You get to a point where you have the books that you're writing to market, and then you have the books of your heart that they just have to be. I think you've just written that with the other Bridget.
Yeah, I guess so. That was that's just like an idea that sort of came, and I had to write it, and it wasn't necessarily in exactly the box that I'd already gone. Back to your wonderful book. Talked about that decided to write now. Tell us first. Let's give us a spiel. I've read it, so we probably should give a little bit of a spiel to those people who haven't yet read it.
It was inspired by my really good friend Kate. In 2017, she passed away really suddenly, and I hadn't seen her for ages. And you know how you just assume you'll see someone again. That's fine. That's someone. I'll see you one day. We've got kids. We were young. Like I never thought there was time limit. And then I just got a phone call one day that she passed away. So exactly like in Bucket List, she'd gone in with pneumonia to a hospital. And the doctor said to her, oh, I'm just going to need the name of your oncologist because we can't treat the pneumonia until we talk about your leukemia. And she was like, my what?
Oh, my gosh.
And then she didn't ever leave the hospital again. And so, but she had
inspired by actual, something.
And then the other bit that inspired it was at her funeral. And I just want to say, I'm only talking about her because I've talked to her family about, is it okay to tell these stories? And they're very keen for everyone to know about Kate. And also, if you'd like to donate to the Leukemia Foundation, it would be much appreciated.
Is there anything there that's in the back of the book or anything? Because I've got the art.
Yeah, it's going to be on my socials, and you can find it. It'll be on my website from February. Once I've updated my website, there'll be a button to donate. But when I went to her funeral, she had young children, and she's very close to her sister, who is only 14 months younger than her. Oh. And she said to them that she wasn't afraid of dying, but she was really worried about how they were all going to cope after she went. So she bought presents for like their first birthdays and Christmas after she passed, so that they would have a gift from her when it came. And then she had, this will make us all cry, but she also at her funeral, she had really little kids, and the chapel was like full of helium balloons, and there was like a big, I think it was a unicorn for her daughter and a superhero for her son all around the coffin, so that they wouldn't remember as like a traumatic.
Oh, that's lovely.
Thing. And that just summed her up as a person. And I just spent years thinking, oh, wow, like
really thinking about other people rather than herself at such a time.
Yeah, it wasn't how I imagined facing death. Like I thought I'd it would be terrifying and but it was this kind of moment of real love for her, of like, all she was thinking about was, how can I help them get through the grief to the other side? And so that was the inspiration for the book. So the book is about two sisters, and Bree's an influencer, and she does turn up to a hospital and is diagnosed with leukemia. And the book starts and ends with her and her kind of intention to how she loves her family. And so what she does is she bequeaths her unfinished bucket list and her 1 million followers on Instagram to her younger sister, who's really shy and lost, and says, I've organized a deal for my medical debt to be paid off if you finish this on my Instagram account. And the whole kind of circus, and that's the romantic comedy bit.
So that's the comedy aspect.
That's so most of the book is the rom-com of Jodie finishing the list and getting through grief and finding the meaning of things and falling in love, and her family kind of turning their attention from grieving for Bree to Jodie and life and what might come next. So that's the kind of story of the book. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. As I said, so it may sound like a sad story, and you know, there's obviously a lot of talk of grief, and you feel very strongly with the fact you can feel the family's emotion, I think, especially in that Thanksgiving scene. Oh yes, that beginning's pretty hard. I remember when you were editing it, it's like, how much can a reader take before they're like closing the book? Hang on there, if anyone's listening. You get to there's a good payoff, and you need that. I guess we need its character. We need to show why. Yeah, I felt like you really needed to know Bree. If you didn't have the opening chapter with in her point of view, and you just went to Jodie and the grief, I agree, you lose the weight of what a person meant. They're erased from the book, whereas this way you are coming in and you love her as much as they love her, I hope. And then and then you come back to her at the end. It's got a bookend with her. I love how we get her little messages throughout. So we won't give too much away. So I was going to ask for the inspiration, but we talked about that, and that is, I'm very sorry to hear about your friend, but it's beautiful that you have written this. Yeah, and I was really touched. I want to shout out to her sister and her mother, who were both chuffed, and they said that she would have been thrilled to be the inspiration. So that I'm really touched that the family have embraced. Yeah, I think it's an outcome from Kate's life as well. Yeah, and so obviously this is the book of your heart, because of all of that. My mother, actually, I wrote this during COVID lockdown, which was hard, but then my mother got cancer during it. So we were also going through all the rounds of cancer treatments while I was writing it, so I think that's one reason the emotion is in the book, is because I was going through it all over and over again. Now, okay. Yeah, she is. Yeah, she came through. She came through. Yes. Well, it was nice of her to go through that then. A bit of research. Really unexpected research. She should be dedicated to this book too. Yeah, I've said thank you to her. She's had a few books. She's got the next one. There's another book after this called Best, First and Last, which will be out in December. And that one is dedicated to my mum and is about mothers and daughters. So she gets the book. Fair enough. I'm sure she'll have to do it. The writing process, I'm always fascinated to hear. And obviously this is a writing podcast. So you've written different types of books. And I guess like me, you've written like pure, I was about to say straight romance, but I don't mean straight as in I know what you mean. Yeah, pure romance. Pure romance. Yeah. And then you've written, book club fiction with romantic elements. I think that's a good way of describing it. So I'd love to know a couple of things. Firstly, what is your process like? Are you, in the way we talk about, mostly a plotter, a bit more of a pantser? And has that changed, or does it change from book to book? See if we can remember that. See if both of us can remember that. Yeah, I can remember. I think it's changed a lot actually now that I write for contract mostly. Yeah. Bucket list wasn't. I wrote that. How it's changed and why. Yeah. Process is really messy. I'm like, I know from the outside it looks like, when everyone's looking at you from the outside, it always looks easy and polished, and she just sits down and writes a book in 3 or 4 months and it's done, and that must be easy for her. And if you are on tight deadlines where maybe you're churning out quite a lot of words a day or a week or a month, everyone's I don't know how you do that, and that must be some magic process. But actually it's just incredibly messy, my life. I'm always doing multiple things at once. I work really long days, and I don't multitask that well for someone who has to multitask all the time. I'm the same, I think. So I get quite harried and stressed. I have a lot of lists on the go at all times. Bucket list? I have probably a mental one, but I haven't written it down.
We'll get back to that. Okay.
Yeah, and it does probably change. So with writing, what I try and do is have blocks of time. That's why I think I'm more of a binger than a steady. You have friends who write who will get apps or do whatever, and they'll post their little, like the bar that gets bigger. Mine would just make me cry because it would be nothing for a really long time, and then a lot, and then nothing for a very long time.
However it works.
Yeah. But I think I try to. So the last few years I've tried to write over summer because I teach a lot during the year. It'll be from like November till March be my writing time. And then in January and February, I was just writing. That's all I do. So I can write reasonably quickly once I get going, but partly that is the fear of deadline, knowing the deadline's there. Yeah, but there's no like secret to it. I think you just sit down and you do it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's so unromantic, but
I know a few authors I've heard who do, they have got full-time jobs. I guess it's yours full-time?
Yes, yeah.
But even if it's a pretty heavy part-time job, it's the same. I know a few like who just one day a week is when they sit down and get words, or they take holiday. And it's actually funny. I was watching, who was I watching? The lady who wrote, the author who wrote, oh my gosh, Agni Aunt's book or something, Dead Aunties. I don't know. It's a wrong time.
We'll send a link when we remember.
Fine, but it starts with someone going on a date, I think, and the date dies and the aunties help her get rid of it. Anyway,
awesome book.
Talking about yesterday, something I really related to, and it was because I used to fit my writing in around a small business, and when
you have kids, when they're young
at home, and that was really hard. So as soon as they were all at school and we sold the business, I thought, now I have all the time in the world, I'll be able to write more. And it doesn't actually necessarily work that way.
No.
Write pretty much exactly the same as I did when I take a longer time to do it.
Yeah.
This author said what she does is she always schedules something like lunchtime and afternoons pretty much every day so that she actually has to not waste.
Yeah. I think it is really, I think the most unproductive I ever was when I had a scholarship to PhD scholarship, and I had a whole year at one point where I didn't work at the same time. It's so unproductive. Whereas the minute I added in kids and a part-time job and finishing the PhD, I could get it done. It's just busy people.
That whole ask a busy person.
Yeah. But when they were young, I'd write up when they went to bed.
Same.
Like when they were little.
I can do that now. I'm too tired now.
I can't now. I think teenagers and older kids get psychologically more work.
Yeah.
Like you're more tired from
They go to bed later for a start.
Yeah. Or they go to bed after us.
Yeah, on holidays now. But like same with me when they were little, it was get them to bed as early as I could.
Yeah. Yep. And I'd sit down about 8 o'clock and write till midnight.
Ignore him and then write. Yeah. That was about it. Yeah. But so you carve out time. What about your actual, like, what do you do to write a book? Do you do any planning? Do you dive right in?
Yeah, I probably have it looks like I write a book quickly. So sometimes I can do it in just a few weeks. I can write the whole draft, but the pre-writing takes a long time. Okay. You often have the concept, like I often now will sell on a concept and I might write an outline. So that's often done a long time before I actually write the book. Yeah. And then I have all that time of daydreaming and thinking, and I usually have a notebook on the go per book, and I just use it to write stuff down and probably do a lot of Googling of pictures. Like I often haven't been to the places they're set. So this is set in Delaware. The family's from Delaware. I've never been there. So I spent a lot of time like looking up the streets, Google Earth, like looking what businesses are around. If they were going to go get coffee, which coffee shop would you go to? Like I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you.
I picked somewhere. I wanted cold winters, like somewhere a bit quiet, cold winters, somewhere that seemed like Everymanville, that it was not like fancy, so that when she goes to New York or Antarctica or other places, there's a contrast.
Wow. Yeah.
And actually one of the best compliments I've ever had as a writer is I got an Instagram DM from a reader from Delaware.
Yeah.
Who was just like, oh, hi. So I wonder if we've met, because I grew up around there and I go to the college that Jodie goes to in the book, and also my younger sibling had leukemia and was in that hospital, and I was just like, I've never been to any of those places. It's all just from online.
My goodness.
So that was such a nice compliment to
and
think.
you probably went, phew, that's good.
Yeah, got that right.
Let's just say it also shows if you are writing a first book or you don't have a lot of money, which most of us don't, and you want to set a book somewhere, you can do quite a lot of research, I guess.
I think most of it you can these days, because I remember being really like going to, I think I published one book, but I was still pretty early, and I was a single mother of 2 very young kids, didn't have much money. And I went to a writing workshop, and the writer said, if you're going to set a book somewhere, you must go there. If it's set in Paris, you have to go to Paris. And I was just like, that's never happening. Like, does that mean everything I write has to be right here?
Yeah.
But then I was like, no, but if I write a crazy Western, like if I'm writing,
you can't go there.
I can't go to 1883 Montana. No, so
it's true.
But also it's always a slightly hyper-colored fantasy world in these books anyway. It's not reality.
Exactly. But that's a very good point, historical fiction. Yeah.
What was the second part of your question?
It was I just meant plotting and what do you do once you sit down? You've thought about a lot.
I'm a real mix of both.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever plotted at all until I started selling on concept, and then you have to write a pitch. You send them, like, I'm in the middle of pitching things right now, where I'll send them 5 ideas and be like, which one of these do you like? And they might be like, I like that one, but can you do a bit more of this? And so we workshop the idea, and then I usually have to write an outline.
My outlines, then if I have to do that, it's like pretty solid at the beginning, and then
it gets looser. And I think as a non
happens next, but it'll be a feel good kind
there'll be a happy ending at the end. It'll all work out. But I think I can't be too much of a plotter, because the characters, I think if I spend all my energy creating the characters, it's all okay. Like but I find the first third of the book takes me most of the time to write. I tend to rewrite the first 3 chapters over and over and over, because I can't get them right. If you can get them complicated enough, you can get their problem big enough and interesting enough, and if you can all their inner conflicts, if they're set up all right, once you get that first third done, the rest just writes itself, in my experience. If
you let it, you just give yourself over to the much. I loved your characterization, particularly of obviously the main characters, but the secondary characters like Cheryl, Tish, Kelly, and Grandma Gloria. Is that the right name? So do you do anything particularly to create them, or do they just come alive on the page as you write?
I think they tend to come alive. Like, I think it's worth doing a lot of daydreaming and pre-writing, like not sitting down. I teach a lot of postgrads, and I think one of the major problems I see is when people write the book too quick. They haven't done the thinking through, and so they'll write a whole draft, but there's a lot of problems with it, and then that's a real pain to try and rework something that's that big. So I always say, if you can really spend the time. So if I do a lot of daydreaming, and those little characters pop up, and in fact that's probably one of my problems, is that the little characters tend to take over in all my books. They tend to like really jump out, and then the work for me is I've got to make the main character strong enough to stand up to or rise above the secondary characters.
Oh, I think it's a good character.
You don't have to worry about the depth. You can just do the
or why they're acting certain way.
They just do.
In that way you can have a lot of fun with secondary characters. I think that advice, and I was actually going to ask you, let me just find out where I've got this kind of thing, had something somewhere about Dr. Matthews. What's your best advice for aspiring authors? But I think, we can still go there, but I really think that thinking time is so undervalued, and as an author on contract, as well as being an aspiring author who sometimes you just want to get out there, don't you? You just want to get done.
In a real hurry.
Danger of rushing because of that. But I think there's a danger that's a danger that us authors on contract as well have, because you've got an end date in time, and it's hard to get that.
Your instinct is to sit down and just start writing. Like,
some ways taking time could be actually
and I find I get myself into psychological holes if I sit down too early.
I completely agree. That just happened to me in my rural romance that I would just mention, I think, briefly beforehand, because it was a busy kind of a year, and I had to start, and I had an idea, but it wasn't the characters. It was exactly what you said.
Yeah.
The idea was there, the characters were there, but they weren't deep enough. And so there was no real tension in the book. And I didn't realize this.
Yeah.
I just started and I was like,
and the energy kind of goes, doesn't it? You hit,
yeah,
it just deflates.
yes, because
Yeah.
I just was like, oh, this is I'm not really excited about this anymore, and it's stalled. And then I realized why, and it's so exactly what you said. I feel like if I'd had a few more weeks to just be the story, and because it's similar, like you were talking about books you're writing or pitching now and stuff, and obviously sometimes I've got my next two books actually in my head now, but this one changed at the last minute for various reasons. They wanted a women's fiction, but then they decided actually we'll change my last one to a rural. So I have to really reset quickly. Yeah. Anyway,
it doesn't give you enough time to grow. It's like it's really hard to explain. It's got a bit like I've been making sourdough again lately. So it reminds me of the yeast. You have to give it the time to actually rise up. And if you make the bread too quickly before it's risen, it just doesn't work.
That's a really good analogy, I think. Yeah.
I'll take that off the cup. Let's put that one in.
I like it. So where were we? So you do a bit of pre-thinking, then you spend a lot of time in the beginning. So
then I binge. And then I binge like a nasty person, like where I just do nothing else. Like I don't cook, I don't clean, I get up, all I do, I don't socialize, I just sit at the desk.
So you write chunks of your year, and then you have times where you not in that writing crazy zone.
Yeah. Although it's like there's always something happening. So there's usually edits, copy edits.
For the book before.
So, and if you're doing more than one name or book, you've just finished your first draft and you might have structure edits for one book, copy edits for another book, publicity for another book, and it all just gets confusing.
It's crazy. Let's just take a dive quickly into the name thing there, because obviously I know why. Probably I'm guessing you chose Tess LeSue initially, you said, to distinguish you from your sort of academic.
It was very different. They were just different readerships, and you didn't want to. It would have been really confusing to have read End of the Night, go and then pick up Bound for Eden. Like it just would have been so confusing.
Amy Barry and Amy T. Matthews. So how do you? I was saying, have you got any advice now in hindsight? Would you keep those? Like, because I feel if I had a different name, Rachael Johns is pseudonym, but Rachel's my real name, first name, and I would get confused. Like, people call you. You ever?
Well, I picked Tess. I picked Tess because my parents call me Tess.
Oh, that's right.
So because my middle name's Therese, and they used to call me Amy, Therese, or Tess.
Yeah.
And so I would sometimes answer the Tess. So I was like, oh, that will work. But it still didn't really work. It didn't feel like me so much. I was happy enough with it. The one thing I didn't think through was how hard it was to say aloud. Tess LeSue is actually my grandmother's name. She was also Tess.
Glamorous, sorry.
LeSue was her. My agent at the time was just like, there was a pun on lasso, which it kind of is.
Tess LeSue. Oh,
but I hadn't thought of that. I was just like, oh, it's just my grandmother's name. But it's really hard to say aloud. The S's run together. And people don't quite get how it's spelled, so I wouldn't do that again. It was too hard. But mass market paperbacks just have not done so well since Amazon and indie books rose. So Amy Barry was just moving into rom-com space. So they're basically historical rom-coms. So again, slightly different market. So I was like, I'll just have another name. So I retired the other one, and then being Amy is good. I can answer to it. I do get a little confused sometimes about which book I'm talking about when they're all out at once, because last year in the US, Someone Else's Bucket List and Marrying Off Morgan McBride, so they're two different names, but both books were out the same week.
That's crazy. Insane.
I know. Two different publishers. And originally it was scheduled for, I think one was scheduled for June and one for August, but they both moved them up to May. And I just, that week that it came out, I was just like, I am flipping between Instagrams, but also doing interviews and being like, now, which Amy am I now? Which one is it today?
Wow. I take my hat off. That just sounds way too complicated.
It was.
Are you continue to write in both?
Yep. Yeah. I really like it because I find the Amy T. Matthews books.
There.
Oh, puppy. My cat is here too. But over that side, thank goodness. Amy T. Matthews books are a little bit more serious. Oh, so cute. And they're harder to write for me, I think.
Yeah.
I find the rom-coms really fun and really quick to write. And
like a reprieve, a break.
Yeah, I really enjoy them. They're zesty. I enjoy the Amy T. Matthews books too, but they're
different way.
In terms of technique as well, they just take a little bit more thinking through, and then they're a bit slower.
I find that having written rural romance and then let's say contemporary women's people often ask, do you like one better? And I always say whichever one I'm not writing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. That's 100% right.
It's always greener. It's that's so much easier to write a romance than actually.
But do you think
romances? Oh no, it's not.
Do you think that's the reason you can be so prolific, because you're switching, because it's a refresher?
Maybe. Because I do think, although they're similar, like they're in the same realm, it's not like writing sci-fi or something. And but it gives you a little bit of a break. Different muscles, as you said. Like I relate to what you're saying about the Amy T. Matthews maybe being slightly more difficult. And I think, I don't know if this is how it's for you, but although, as I said, romance is not necessarily easy. Nothing's easy. It's all hard in its own way. But with romance novels, I know we don't like to use the word formula, but I've got a structure to follow.
Yeah, it's a very tight structure. So that helps.
Certain things have to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas in sort of general book clubbish type fiction, you might have one point of view, you might have 4 point of views. Each book is slightly different, and I have to work out how that is going to be. And although obviously all stories do have an overarching kind of structure, it's
not a set. And so you have to really think through the beats and the energy and where the story's going, in a way that with the romances, I know they're going to meet. There's going to be a lot of fun. Something's going to break them up. They're going to get back together. And you instinctively, I don't plan it or think it through, but I instinctively know as I'm writing it where that needs to happen. You can just feel, okay, this needs to happen now.
I get exactly what you mean with that. I'm just aware of the time, because I don't want to keep you forever. But I have to ask a particular thing about this book. So there is a scene almost straight out of When Harry Met Sally.
Yes, there is.
Someone else's bucket list, which is one of the funny parts that I mentioned earlier. So I'm guessing you're a fan of the movie.
Yes, huge fan. I've been following your rom-coms online.
Oh my gosh, that's been a bit of a drought, because as I told you before we started, I'm delayed on my deadline. So I was thinking that January would be a nice month to
do it.
Dreaming, and I could watch rom-coms, and now I'm still madly writing.
Trying to fit in the rom-coms
a day. So it's a bit difficult. But what I want to ask is, what about Harry Met Sally do you think it's made it such sort of a memorable classic?
I mean, I think it's so well written. It's just so beautifully written. And the fact that they're just so well motivated as characters. You get immediately who they are, what they're scared of, why they're great together, but also you totally understand why they're not getting together. And I think their conflicts, I love that their conflicts are everyday conflicts. They're not major dramas, because I think that's true in regular dating life for 90% of us. That what causes our friction is the small stuff, not the big stuff.
That's so true. Actually, I remember listening to Emily Henry on a podcast. I've got it written on my wall somewhere, and she said it's not how big the stakes are, it's how personal they are. And
that's a great quote.
You don't have to go crazy with trauma. You just need to explore why it matters to the actual characters.
I love her books. I think they're great.
Done a masterclass reading her books. So now the real question though. Have you ever visited the diner?
I have.
I have. Your orgasm there.
I did not, but I didn't even get to sit under the sign. I was off in the corner. But
it's true that table is you have to book it and things like that. And
you're not allowed. I don't think you can book at Katz's. I don't think they take bookings. You have to stand in queue, and then you might luck out. But it has got a big round sign dangling over it saying, "I'll have what she's having," and this is where it happens.
I've been to New York twice, and I've never been there.
Oh, it's so worth going. The food is unbelievably good. They're it's the family's been doing it for 180 years or something, and they ship all this pastrami all over the world. But it is amazing. Wow. They're huge though. They're the sandwiches are so big. You know how you see in the movie her scooping bits out?
Yeah.
It's so big. So I would share the sandwich with someone.
Okay, that's true. A lot of stuff in America is big anyway. So I would say, there's one thing I'd really love to explore or ask you about. So in this book, as we've mentioned earlier, Bree, the main character, Jodie's sister, is an influencer. And she, as you said, 1 million followers. So I wanted to know, I was just thinking that writing and social media, we touched on it slightly earlier when you were talking about having to fit that in your days rather than websites and stuff. That is a big part of our lives these days, unfortunately, whether you're a writer or not, or unfortunately or fortunately, whatever you look at it. And so I wanted to know, how do you contend with your social media? How do you feel about social media as a writer? And have you got any, do you have a process for it, all that sort of stuff?
I'm probably mostly on Instagram now.
Yeah.
I like Instagram a lot. I probably don't post as much as I could, but you try and be a little bit authentic. And also, I don't want to spam people. There's a lot of book sales that you do on there.
It's really hard at promo time, isn't it?
It is so hard. You feel like you're just going to bother everyone. I like stories for that it's just going to flicker past. It's not going to.
You've got events to say, sharing like something you've got in a magazine or in podcasts. And people be
I really like Instagram. I find it really easy. It's really easy to toggle between but I have a lot of postgraduate students who are like Generation Z, because I'm an X, and I feel like you've got to own your own relationship to social media. Like, I don't want to be pretending that I'm young and I'm hip to the culture, because I am not.
And then it's obvious, isn't it? Because
they will know, they know in a heartbeat when you're trying to be cool, and I'm not a cool person anymore. So I am not on Book Talk. I have an account just to watch things and see what happens, but I can ask my 23-year-old postgrads what's going on, and they'll send me stuff. They'll be like, hey, so this is look at this Book Talk, or look at what's happening here. And so I feel really lucky that I've got access to people who are young and watching it, but a lot of our kids are. And but it's really, I think the thing to think about with it is it's just like word of mouth. There are paid influencers, but really the stuff that gets traction, I think, is just really authentic word of mouth about books. Like when they pass on a book, if it's Emily Henry or it's Colleen Hoover or it's Fourth Wing at the moment or whatever it is.
It's not mostly because it's never usually because of the author.
No, it's got nothing to do with us. It's really literally they love the book and are telling everyone to read it, and then they all read it, and then that keeps amplifying. But it's no different to word of mouth. It's just very specific to a certain generation. That's how they're doing it. And so I don't feel like it's my place to weigh in as an old person and be on there. I think some people my age are on there and loving it, and it's their natural habitat, but it's just not mine.
No, I think whatever you feel comfortable with, if you're happy and you're enjoying it, give it a go. But I do struggle with social media. I like it. I think a love-hate relationship. I think it's but I do think that we shouldn't worry too much about it, because in the end it's right.
I think I saw Stephanie Lawrence talk at one of my very first Romance Writers of Australia conferences.
Oh, I wonder if that was one of the ones I went to, because I remember
it was really early, and she said that what we've got to remember is it's always about the story. That whatever, I think it was when ebooks were booming and everyone was panicking, and she was like, it's still a book, it's still a story, and whatever incarnation the story takes, it's still a story that you're creating. And I think we've never been able to control word of mouth, really. You can get it in newspapers, or you can get reviews or whatever, but people pick it up or they don't, and they recommend it to their friends or they don't.
Exactly. I did actually a podcast last night, Writers on the Page, where I interviewed Devla McTiernan and I. And we were talking about this, and in the end, there's so much out of your control as an author, and you just got to.
That panics us, doesn't it? Everyone, that seems to be a big panic people have. How do you do it? What's the secret?
Good or bad, it's the way it is. We were talking about just that some in all publishing houses, the way it is that some books are picked out to be the ones that they push that year. Then there's a few that are here, and then a few they basically push out. And
just like with films and TV, because they've only got a limited amount of money too. They have to put their budgets somewhere, and you could spread it across everyone. It'd be so thin, no one would get lifted.
I guess that's why social media has its appeal, because it's like something you can have a bit of control over and try.
Absolutely.
Did you do any research about influencing?
Haven't really, only a little bit of talking to my postgrads, and I'll lurk and I'll have a look, and I read, I always go into bookshops and see what's on their recommended lists and what's on the best-selling list, and I'll read the New York Times every week to see what's on the top best-selling list, just to think. I think it's important as an author to know your genre, to know what people are reading in your genre, and to respect that. You hear a lot of people, I think it's probably a little bit out of insecurity or bewilderment about why certain things are selling. Like when dragons are the thing right now. And some people are like bewildered by it, but it's, oh, that's interesting. That's a cultural moment. Something's happening there that people love dragons.
Have you read Fourth Wing?
I haven't yet. It's on my bookshelf.
I have read it actually, which is totally, because usually I like fantasy is probably the least. Fantasy is something that I don't know if I've, apart from school.
Is it romantasy? Does it fit under the thing?
Romantasy. Yeah. And I was just going to say, I think the thing is, if you read that, it's the dragons are interesting, but it's what really is the sexual chemistry between characters, it's just on the page, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think sexual chemistry seems to be driving a lot of things right now. That's behind Colleen Hoover, that's behind Hannah Grace. Like really intense sexual chemistry seems to be what people are going for right this minute. Yeah, so whether that's dragons or aliens or Western. Yeah, whatever it is. That's right. We've probably almost definitely used up our time, but I've got so many other questions that I wanted to ask you. What is your advice? Do you have any advice as a writing teacher if anyone wants to study academic or do an academic study in writing or do a PhD? Probably have a few bits. One is everyone's always in a real hurry, and I know I was as well, that you feel like the clock is ticking and you're going to run out of time, and just to take a breath and realize you're not going to run out of time. Like, just do the work. I think a lot of people don't even care. Yeah. Like if you run out of time, like sadly breathing. Yeah. But the idea that people want to skip the work and get to the publication and the publicity and all the kind of fun stuff, but actually the work is the job. Yeah. So I think to focus on craft, a bit like if you're an actor or a musician or whatever, even if you're in sport, if you're a soccer player, most of your life is training, even when you're top of your game. Even if you're the best in the world at what you do, most of your daily life is training. And I think you want to concentrate on the training no matter how do you train how many. I think you read a lot and you stay up to date. You stay up to date about everything about your industry. So you go to conferences, you make writing networks, you listen to podcasts like this, you read the trades if you can. I think also part of that is curiosity. I think you often see a lot of insecurity in artists who, that's stupid or that's stupid, or I'm not reading that because and I just find that myopia, you find it everywhere. You can go to a romance conference and people are like, literature sucks, those people are awful. And you go to a literary festival and they're like, romance, who would read romance? Or people would do it to comic books or whatever. And my advice is to stay really curious and be open to all of it, read all of it and listen to everyone you meet, because I just think that lack of curiosity is the death of good art. Yeah, I completely agree. That's great. Have you got a craft book that you... Oh, I've got lots. There's so many that I love. There's actually a really good book called Art and Fear, which I recommended in Romance Writers of Australia's newsletter. And I can't remember who wrote it. It's right here. It's David Bales and Ted Orland. And that book I always go back to because it goes through all the kind of psychological blocks that you have with writing. Yeah. And I find that helps me a lot. Very useful. Yeah, because it is so much in your head and so mental. Yeah, it is. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. But before you go, let's just hold up your cover again. Yeah. So someone else's bucket list is out end of January. Yeah. You'll be able to find everywhere in February in the shops. So take a selfie and post it off your here and tag Amy and read it. And then you've got another book out. Is it 2 more books? Yeah, this one would be like April. I don't have the Australian copy. Hold on one second. I've got an American copy. So basically just follow Amy last week and follow her in Instagram. Marrying Off Morgan McBride. So such good titles. Yeah, so Kit McBride will be out. I think it's April. And then Morgan McBride will be out sometime over the winter. So you can get both of them. So we've heard you can follow Amy Matthews. Yeah, Amy T. Matthews author on Insta and Amy Barry author on Instagram. They're probably the places I am the most. To check. And obviously you Google and you'll find websites and things like that. Which will be updated in February. Exactly. So actually probably by the time it comes. But I will have done it. Are you writing anything at the moment? Yeah, I just have finished up all the edits on Best, First and Last under Amy T. Matthews, and that will be out July in the United States, December here in Australia. And that's a book about a grandmother, mother and daughter who hike up. They hike Machu Picchu because the grandmother's just been widowed, the mother's getting a divorce, and the granddaughter can't decide if she likes this guy or not. Like if she doesn't know if she's commitment phobic or if he's full of red flags, she can't decide. They go on a hike together and they tell stories about their first loves and come to an understanding of their lives through that.
Oh, it sounds fabulous. I cannot wait to read it. And we are actually doing it in the Rachael Johns online book club next year now, I think, because I heard
so exciting.
I heard today that it had been postponed because we were going to do it in October. And unfortunately now it's going to be probably January 2025.
Yeah.
But hey,
awesome.
Maybe again. Sure, it'll come around,
really quickly, I'm sure.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time with the rest of your promo schedule. And please check out Amy's books and let her know and post them all over the socials. And thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.